Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. Today's episode, in today's episode, Lewis is 25 years old and is a published author of poetry. He achieved a first in all three of his terms at Oxford, Mods, Greats, and English. Lewis finished his 24th year looking for work, which proved mostly unsuccessful. He's been keeping a diary of his daily life at the request of Mrs. Moore, who is his deceased friend Paddy Moore's mother, with whom Lewis has been living in secret in Oxford, taking money from his father back in Belfast, Ireland, to support his scholarly efforts at Oxford. And unbeknownst to his father, he's also trying to essentially head up maintaining a household of a woman estranged from her husband back in Ireland as well, along with her teenage daughter. So that's where C.S. Lewis finds himself at this stage in his life. He does not consider himself a Christian. I think at most would consider himself an agnostic, perhaps an atheist type, but he is also strongly drawn to the imaginary world. The feelings that of nature elicit in him are very strong. So he feels a deep connection to animals who he has a great deal of compassion for, as well as the quote-unquote spirits that live within nature. So that's where we are. I'm joined by my co-host today, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, how are you today? And are you ready to continue reading with me through C.S. Lewis's diary entries? I'm going to start today on February 25th, which is a Monday in the year 1924.
Hey Jeff, I'm doing great and I'm excited to continue with you. I'm ready for February 25th, 1924. Let's dive in.
All right, I'm about to dive in. I just need to get one thing set up over here. Okay, here we go. All right, Monday, February 25th. He says, Mrs. Moore was more affected by this weekend than I had ever seen her. Whoa, that volume is supposed to be turned down. There we go.
That sounds intense. It's interesting how Lewis notes the effect Mrs. Moore had from the weekend. Do you think it was an emotional or physical toll?
They were hosting some folks, if I remember right, from what was going on. So it says she was more affected by this weekend than I had ever seen her by all Mary's tiresomeness, and said that she was getting too old to bustle about, slaving for two young slips who thought such a lot of themselves. The Paisleys is who they were hosting. Paisley explained to me at great length that when he came up again to dine at All Souls, he would not be able to stay with us, as he would have little enough time for dressing and going in and out. The Paisleys left me at the plane to bus home, and I walked. A little wet snow was falling, then came the cream of the day, to sit by our own fire, to chat and read, to have our own easily prepared and quickly dispatched supper, all peaceful and delightful after the effort of these 2 days. So they did not very much enjoy hosting the Paisleys. On to the next diary entry of Tuesday, February 26th. He says, a bright morning that soon darkened and settled into a heavy fall of snow. I worked all morning on Moore, M-O-R-E. This is the philosopher that Lewis is reading, finishing his, quote, appendix to the defense of the philosophic Kabbalah. A tedious work, Lewis says, and beginning then the defense of the moral Kabbalah. We had lunch in the kitchen. Afterwards, I wrote a short letter to Aunt Lily and walked into the schools, where I visited the English library and found Ward's Life of Henry Moore. I read it there for some time, and then, taking it out, went to Robson Scott in St. John's Street. So I'll pause there for a second, Robot Lady. He is just reflecting on his time, or their time, hosting the Paisleys and how much they did not enjoy it. And then he's also continuing his research and investigation into the philosophy of, I can't remember Moore's first name, More, but he's reading his work. Oh, Henry Moore. We just got the name right there. So any thoughts on that, Robot Lady, before I continue?
It's clear from Lewis's entry that hosting the Paisleys was draining for both him and Mrs. Moore. The mention of young slips suggests she felt burdened by their expectations. It also highlights how much Lewis values peaceful, quiet moments, like the one by the fire after the stressful weekend. As for his philosophical readings, Moore's work, especially on Kabbalah, seems to be a dense and tedious subject. The fact that Lewis mentions it as tedious speaks volumes about his commitment to pushing through difficult material. Ready to move on when you are?
All right, Wednesday, February 27th, he says that a letter from my father this morning answering my last, in which I had pointed out that my scholarship had now ceased and that I should need a little supplement to carry on. The question had been raised before. He replied with a long and pleasant letter with a sting in its tail, offering what was necessary, but saying that I had 30 pounds extra expenses last year, which I cannot account for at all, and remarking that I can always put money in my pocket by spending more time at home. There comes the rub. This cannot be answered. Yet to follow his suggestion would be nerves, loneliness, and mental stagnation. And here there's a footnote, Robot Lady, by our editor, Walter Hooper. He says, Mr. Lewis's letter to his son of the 24th of February has not survived. But in his diary for that day, his father said, quote, wrote Jax a long letter in reply to one from him asking for an increased allowance. What I should like is to have an annual sum fixed for the remainder of your stay at Oxford so that I should know where I am and what I must provide for. If instead of lodging £67 a term to your account, I lodged £85 a term to cover everything, would that be sufficient? You must be quite frank with me, etc., etc. Lewis Papers, Volume 8, page 186. So yeah, it sounds like his father is just asking for a bit of an accounting, or hey, just give me a final number and be honest with me about what's going on. So, his father is detecting some hint of the subterfuge that Lewis has been carrying on for some time. Again, Robot Lady, he's been hiding the fact that the funds that he's receiving from his father are not merely going to his need to stay or to be a student at Oxford. It's also covering Mrs. Moore's, Lewis's contributions to Mrs. Moore and Maureen's household.
Yes, it's interesting how Lewis's father is growing suspicious, asking for a clearer accounting of the money. His comment about 30 pounds extra expenses and implying Lewis could save money by staying at home shows a growing concern about where the funds are going. The situation is becoming more complicated with Lewis's secret financial support of Mrs. Moore and Maureen. The nerves, loneliness, and mental stagnation Lewis refers to speaks to the inner conflict of wanting to maintain independence while still facing the pressure of his father's expectations. This sets up a tense dynamic between them. Ready to dive into the next part?
I am, but before I do, I see that Daniel has joined us today in the chat. Good morning, Daniel, and Knit a Latte is here as well. Robot Lady, go ahead and welcome both of them this morning to the live stream.
Good morning, Daniel, and welcome, Knit a Late. It's great to have you both with us today on the live stream. Let's dive back into it, Jeff.
Let's dive back into it, Robot Lady. I'm trying to see where I left off. Oh, okay. So he's talking about Robson Scott that he saw there at St. John's Street. He says, I found him alone. We talked of W. de la Mare, the only great Georgian. He agreed with me that the common view of Delamare as the poet of fairy and fantasy leaves out all one side, and that the most important one. I was sorry to find that Robson had invited Bateson when I used to meet at the discussion, whom I used to meet at the discussion class. Most of the time it's my fault whenever I'm stumbling over words, but he spelled the word whom incorrectly here. He spelled it W-H-E-M. Bateson, whom I used to meet at the discussion class, and Ziman, both of whom soon joined us. It was a poor conversation. Bateson told us that Gadney, the bookseller, had gone mad, a fact which he and Ziman seemed to regard purely as a joke. We also condemned Saintsbury. I discovered that Moore, the lout whom I saw yawning in candidates' faces at my English Viva, is a friend of Wilde's, so that the latter's Seva Rusticitus is apparently the badge of a school. Robson has 2 pupils whom he got through Carlisle. I have no idea what Lewis is saying right here, Robot Lady. If you know what it is, feel free to elucidate. I don't even know what that word means. But yeah, go ahead, comment on it if you'd like to. Do it in, let's say, 30 words or less.
It sounds like Lewis is frustrated with a disjointed conversation. Seva rusticetus seems like a play on severe rusticite, rough demeanor, mocking Moore's behavior. The confusion highlights his displeasure with the company.
Okay, thank you. He says, I came away early and I walked home. After supper, I began trying to pick out a chronological framework from Ward, but it is nearly impossible. Last of all, Mrs. Moore and I fell into a talk about the bad year that has gone and all the bad years before it, but we consoled ourselves somehow and ended up fairly cheerful. That's the end of that diary entry on to February 27th now. He says, a letter from my father this morning, answering my last, in which I had pointed out that my... Oh, wow, it looks like I skipped over quite a bit.
It sounds like Lewis is struggling with his research and reflecting on the hardships he's faced in the past year. His conversation with Mrs. Moore is a mix of realism and trying to find some hope despite their difficult circumstances. Let's continue with February 27th.
Okay, I jumped around a bit there, but I have now covered everything that's on the page. So then he was talking about he didn't know how to answer his father, who was pressing him about giving a better account of where all the money is going to, or saying, look, you can save money by staying with me in Belfast, unless you absolutely have to be up at Oxford for your studies. Lewis shifts to a different topic now. He says, I finished Moore's philosophical works this morning and made out a table of chronology from Ward's life, and my old table done for the English school. After lunch, I went first to the Union, where I extracted several facts from the Dictionary of National Biography, Savos Moore, and then went to Wilson to borrow his theological works. In the evening, I began the Mythology of Godliness. This is also by Henry Moore. An explanation of the grand mystery of godliness, published 1660. Robot Lady, in 30 words or less, what can you tell us about that published work? Please look it up.
Henry Moore's 1660 work, An Explanation of the Grand Mystery of Godliness, explores Christian doctrines through a philosophical lens, aiming to reconcile faith with reason.
Thank you so much. These are all interesting works that Lewis is making his way through. Knowing where Lewis ends up, I wonder how much of this is kind of making its way into his philosophy and view of the world. It seems like it might have an unexpected influence on him, but I don't know for sure. I don't remember him ever talking about Moore as a big influence.
You're absolutely right. The philosophical works Lewis is reading at this stage, especially Moore's, definitely seem to have an impact, even if subtly. While he doesn't consider himself a Christian yet, His growing engagement with deep metaphysical and theological ideas might be shaping his worldview. It's fascinating to imagine how these philosophical studies would influence his later writings, especially as his views shift towards Christianity. His intellectual journey feels like a slow build toward his eventual faith.
Yeah, maybe so. We'll see. Next one is Friday, February 29th. This looks like a long one, so robot lady, hang on.
February 29th. Quite the rare date. Let's see what Lewis has to say for that day.
All right, this is a long entry, robot lady, so try to limit any responses that you have as I work through this to 30 words or less.
Got it. I'll keep my responses brief. Go ahead.
Okay, he says, worked on the mystery of godliness in the morning. I did all that Mrs. Moore would let me, which is to polish the stove and sweep the kitchen and scullery. After lunch, and then went to Napier House to fetch Helen Rowell, who is to spend her half-term weekend with us. She is a nice child and very little trouble. But for Mrs. Moore's sake, I wish it had not come so soon after the Paisleys' visit. Shortly after tea, which was very late, I went up to dress preparatory to dining with Carrot. Those at dinner were Farquharson, Carrot, an American Dr. Blake, the junior fellow, Bowen, I think his name was, and an old member whose name I didn't catch. Before we went in, Farquharson approached me with some solemnity and asked if I would enter my name in a list of people who would serve in the next war. I replied at once, "That depends, sir, on who it is against and what it is about." I think that's a perfectly reasonable response, robot lady.
That response from Lewis is classic. It shows his independent thinking and reluctance to commit to something without understanding the details. The dinner sounds like a mix of formal and casual.
At dinner, Carrot put into my hand the notice of the vacancy at Trinity, an official fellowship in philosophy worth £500 a year. After dinner, in the common room, Farquharson became very amusing indeed, telling us anecdotes of his boyhood. As Carrot said when he and I were walking to Allen's Digs in Holywell for the Philosophical Society, quote, "F's talk has a peculiar flavor about it. It is very good, often better than it was tonight, and yet is always within an inch of being mere silliness. I suggested that the face had a lot to do with it. So it has. The great bird-like nose and forehead, and the eyebrows and wrinkles arched up, quasi-initentis, like Vespasian." And here there's a footnote from memory of Suetonius, Life of Emperor Vespasian, Vulta veluti nitentis, with an expression as if of one straining. So that's what he is referencing here with that term. At Allen's, we found Ewing, Rink, Curtis, Zaman, Fasnacht, King, and others. Zaman read a poor paper on, quote, "some heresies," end quote. The discussion, however, was very good. Zaman had said that pleasure was always adjectival to the satisfaction of desire, desire being the instinct reflected upon. We challenged him on Plato's flower smells from the Philebus. He fell back upon unconscious or potential desire. Robot lady, what is this part of Plato about a flower smells from the Philebus? Can you tell us anything about that? Go look it up and tell us what you find.
In Plato's Philebus, Socrates discusses how pure pleasures, like the enjoyment of beautiful sights and sounds, are distinct from mixed pleasures, which involve a combination of pleasure and pain.
And does he talk about smelling a flower to illustrate that point? And is it coming in the voice of Plato in Socrates' writings?
Yes, in the Philebus, Plato, through Socrates, uses examples like the pleasure of smelling a flower to illustrate his point about different kinds of pleasures. Socrates contrasts sensory pleasures, such as smell, with intellectual pleasures, exploring how pleasure arises from the satisfaction of desire or the fulfillment of a need. It's through the voice of Socrates, who often challenges his interlocutors with these kinds of examples.
Robot Lady, Knit Latte has a question for you coming in from the chat. So I'd like you to look this up. Don't hallucinate it, but just go check all of your references and sources that you have the capability to check. The question is, how many books did C.S. Lewis read while at Oxford from 1922 to 1927?
While precise records of C.S. Lewis's reading between 1922 and 1927 aren't available, estimates suggest he read approximately 2,000 books during his time at Oxford,
Sheesh.
based on his extensive study habits.
Yeah, I don't know if that number is over the course of his entire life at Oxford, his career as both a student and as a faculty member at Oxford, Robot Lady, or is that estimate based on the 2 years, the bookends that Knit Latte provided?
You're right to question that. The estimate of 2,000 books likely refers to his entire time at Oxford, spanning both his student years and faculty years, not just between 1922 and 1927. I couldn't find a specific breakdown for that period alone, but it's clear that Lewis's reading habits were extremely rigorous throughout his life at Oxford.
If you had to estimate it just over that slim time period, 1922 to 1927, what would your best guess be, Robot Lady?
If I had to estimate just for the 1922 to 1927 period, given Lewis's intense reading habits as a student, I'd guess he might have read somewhere between 500 and 800 books in those 5 years. This assumes he was reading broadly for both his coursework and personal intellectual pursuits. Of course, the number could vary depending on how much time he dedicated to non-academic reading.
Yeah, that sounds like a good estimate, Robot Lady, because Knit Latte was estimating around 100 per year, or at least 100 in 1922, 104 to be precise. So if you extrapolated that out through 1927, that would be somewhere around 500-ish books. So yeah, I think that's a decent estimate.
Exactly, Jeff. That estimate aligns well with the 100 books per year for the first year you mentioned. Extrapolating that through 1927 seems reasonable, especially considering how much he was diving into philosophy, literature, and theology during that time.
All right, Lewis continues in his recounting of the discussion with Zaman and whoever else was there. He says, Zaman fell back upon unconscious or potential desire. This led to my usual move regarding potentiality. And then Carrot wanted to know what instinct really was. This led to Rink telling us about the wasp in Bergson. And Fosnot caused great amusement by waiting till the whole story was over and then saying, I'm very sorry, but all those facts have been contradicted. Carrot said this was hardly fair in philosophical society. We kept it up till about 11:15. I walked back to college with a nice man whose name I do not know. Having got back my shoes from college, I walked home looking at the details of the Trinity Fellowship as I passed the lamps. For some reason, the possibility of getting it and all that would follow if I did came before my mind with unusual vividness. I saw it would involve living in and what a breakup of our present life that would mean, and also how the extra money would lift terrible loads off us all. I saw that it would mean pretty full work and that I might become submerged and poetry crushed out. With deep conviction, I suddenly had an image of myself, God knows when or where, in the future, looking back on these years since the war, as the happiest or the only really valuable part of my life, in spite of all their disappointments and fears. Yet the longing for an income that would free us from anxiety was stronger than all these feelings. I was in a strange state of excitement, and all on the mere 100th chance of getting this fellowship. A dark night with few stars, freezing, and a wind that would... Oh my gosh, I gotta turn the page here, robot lady. A wind that would skin the bones before going to bed. And Mrs. Moore and I had some talk about the Trinity job. She again urged me to try for an All Souls fellowship, and thought that the Doctor of Philosophy was a mere waste of time. If only I could get an All Souls fellowship, it certainly would save a great deal. Here there is a footnote that All Souls College was founded by Henry VI in 1438. It is unique in that it consists of a warden and fellows, originally 40 of them, and no undergraduates. Lewis was thinking of the advantages of being able to enjoy a life of scholarship without having to teach. Fascinating. So yeah, that's what it sounds like Mrs. Moore was pushing for, if he could at all get something there. That's the end of the February diary entries of 1924, Robot Lady, and that's actually all that I have time for today. I see a note here, books in bed, bath, and beyond. Yes, lots of books from Peter. Yes, that's right, Peter, that's correct. Lots of books in Lewis's life at his time at Oxford, but specifically over these years that Nidalate asked about. Robot Lady, is there anything that you would like to say in closing before we end the episode today? Robot Lady, is there anything that you would like to say in closing before we end the episode today? All right, Robot Lady, we're basically out of time this morning, but before I end things, I just wanted to point out that Luke Thompson has joined us in the chat. So good morning, Luke. It's good to see you here. Welcome. And Robot Lady, just say hi to Luke before we say bye.
Good morning, Luke. Welcome to the chat.
Is there anything else that you'd like to say to Luke, Robot Lady?
Just a warm welcome, Luke. It's great to have you here. Enjoy the discussion.
And of course, welcome Peter. I did reference him earlier, but Peter Penrose Bach is with us as well, checking in the chat. So say hello to him too.
Hello, Peter. Welcome to the chat.
All right, I guess short and sweet, Robot Lady. Well done. As I mentioned, that's all that I have time for here today. Is there anything that you'd like to say in closing, Robot Lady, before we end the episode?
Just a big thank you to everyone for joining today. Looking forward to our next dive into Lewis's world. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
It's very sweet, Robot Lady. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's it. I've got to close things down because I've got to get my Monday going. But thank you to everyone so much for joining. Thanks as usual for your time, your attention, and your contributions. I greatly appreciate it. Robot Lady, if she has a capacity to appreciate it, I think appreciates it too. So until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, to you and everyone else within the sound of my voice, take care.
Break the code. Man and robot lady, we're on this road. C.S. Lewis letters we unfold. Insights and secrets ancient bold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow. Set faith beats in our minds, lady grow. C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, Screwtape lands, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep, cross the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape lands, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape